Good morning to all of you, and welcome to a new WISE seminar. We extend a special welcome to all of you who have come from outside the CNIO, or among others, the CNIO Friends, our philanthropy program. As you know, we organize these seminars to raise awareness and to help change the gender biases that exist in science and in our society. For this, today, we have a speaker who will surely be a great source of inspiration, Ana Maiques, co-founder and CEO of Neuroelectrics. Thank you very much, Ana, for accepting our invitation. Ana studied economics at the University of Barcelona and has an MBA from the London Metropolitan University and an advanced management program at IESE Business School. Under her leadership at Neuroelectrics, the company has achieved remarkable accomplishments, including the recognition as one of the best entrepreneurial companies in 2016 in the United States. She is also an active figure in the innovation scene, both in Europe and in the United States. Ana is a permanent member of the European Innovation Council Advisory Board and became a Termeer Fellow at the Henry Termeer Foundation in 2018. Equally important is her role as co-founder of S-Tech, a platform for Spanish scale-ups and unicorns dedicated to fostering the growth of innovative companies. She is also a passionate advocate for gender equality in STEM fields. Her impressive career has been acknowledged on multiple occasions, including the prestigious Most Exceptional Entrepreneur Award by Goldman Sachs in 2022, the Prize for Women Innovators from the European Commission in 2014, and the most inspiring woman on the Inspiring 50 list in Europe for 2 consecutive years, in 2015 and 2016. The title of her talk, Revolutionizing Brain Therapies from Barcelona to Boston, a story of entrepreneurship in the health care sector, which we can't wait to hear. Ana, the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Teni, and especially Maria Blasco for the invitation. We've known each other for some time, so she's also a reference on the science world. I'm going to give you an insight on what we do on neuroscience and my role as an entrepreneur. So it's great to be here. So as you can see, I'm going to drive you through our journey as well as through what I think neurotech holds for the future, which I think is impressive, and what we have learned. So one of the interesting things is that I am myself a business person, but my co-founder, who, by the way, is also my husband, Giulio Ruffini, is a physicist and mathematician. He was trained in Berkeley. He started his career in space at JPL. And it's pretty interesting because I think that why both of our companies, Starlab and Neuroelectrics, have been successful is because we have this two-headed, very strong company. We are extremely careful about science because Giulio is the brain and the science of the company, and I am extremely perseverant to make sure that science has an impact. And I think it's so hard to find because the cultures of science and business are so hard to connect, and it's so hard to do good science and good business. So we also have 4 kids, so I think it's an example that you can grow a successful company and a successful family at the same time. None of our kids wants to be scientists, well, one of them. So they say we work too much, so we'll see. But I think that it's really beautiful, and you can ask me about the journey of mixing science and business in such a way. So this all started in year 2000 at the Observatory Fabra. I joke so much with my American friends because they start business in garage, but we start businesses at the beginning of the century buildings. At the top of the Tibidabo mountain with the city, a place devoted to the study of stars. We started Starlab 23 years ago. So back in year 2000, and I repeat, 23 years ago, we had so clear we wanted to do science and have a social impact. We really wanted to invest our talents to make sure that we could really help society. And we started in 2 areas that both Giulio and we thought they were amazing for the world. the protection of our planet with climate change through Earth observation and satellite. That's where Julio was originally coming from. And neuroscience, two amazing challenges of the century, the brain and the protection of the planet. And it was very interesting because we started working for the European Space Agency back in 2000, doing Earth observation technologies, processing data from satellites. And then one day, a doctor from Valle d'Hebron came to Julio and said, listen, you're a mathematician, and I have EEGs from an alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Can you process the data from these two electroencephalograms and let me know if you see differences? And this is how we got involved into neuroscience. So Julio started to process data of these two EEGs and said, wow, this is pretty fascinating. To me, analyze data from brains or from satellites, it doesn't matter. It's the same skills, it's the same team, it's just a different world. So he started to get really obsessed about neuroscience. And the bad news is that after 20 years of investing heavily, I mean, in Starlab, still the company exists, we spent 10 years doing space observation, and bottom line, nobody cares about climate change. Nobody cares, nobody pays, there's no business. So with sadness in our heart, we had to let go the space part, but neuroscience, everybody cares about their brain, about their diseases, right? So I hope one day we will become very rich, we can invest ourselves in space because we couldn't make it sustainable, which is kind of like a pity, but such is life. You make your bets as an entrepreneur, and then it doesn't work. But so after 10 years of doing basic research in neuroscience through a lot of European grants from the Commission and a lot of effort, we developed this technology that, by the way, do I have it with me? I always do. So, it's in the cabin. Okay, I'll wear it in a little bit. So we developed this amazing technology, which is this wireless cap, plenty of electrodes. If somebody can search it in my bag, I'll put it on later, no worries. But basically, the technology that we developed at Starlab was so important that we decided to spin off Neuroelectrics. Why? At Starlab, we had a lot of physicists, mathematicians, like real scientists. In Neuroelectrics, we wanted to help patients. And for that, you need to create a factory to manufacture devices. You need to have a regulatory team. You have to have quality people. So we needed many more engineers and less scientists. And the focus was very, very medical. So we started Neuroelectrics 10 years ago in 2011 to really help patients that are suffering. So when you're listening to me now, your brain, and you're a scientist, so I know you know this, but when you're listening to me, your brain has 100 billion neurons, and they're communicating not only electrically, but also chemically. We are obsessed with our electrical system. We think, let me find the device. I know what it is. Thank you. Sorry, but I had an early morning, so I needed myself some stimulation. Here. Okay, so this technology that you see here, it's a wireless portable device that you can wear it at the comfort of your home. And what it does, it's pretty amazing. It collects, I have up to only 32 electrodes, and it collects the electrical signals of your brain. So you're called EEG. But what is more revolutionary is that any of the electrodes that I'm wearing right now can also inject electrical currents into your brain. So it's kind of like a non-invasive read and write. The concept of electricity has been in the history of humanity since the Roman times. There are graphical evidence that Romans and Egyptians took electric fish from the water and put them over their heads to deal with pain. Pretty shocking that they were using electricity from fish to deal with pain. And of course, we know about electroshock therapy that has a really bad press, but still saving millions of lives of patients suffering from depression. We have DBS, deep brain stimulation. We have transcranial magnetic stimulation approved in the US for both depression and OCD. And this is called transcranial current stimulation. So basically what it does is what you see. So this would be my brain, any of the electrodes. You can see red, like meaning more frequency, higher bands. So this is the electrical activity of the brain. and blue less activity. What is pretty fascinating is that if I know that you suffer from epilepsy and I can see that in this part you have a focus and your brain is hyper excited, I can inject negative currents into the brain and try to prevent the seizures from happening. Or if you have Alzheimer's, maybe your brain needs to boost some electricity and send excitatory currents. So in 2014, 3 years after we started the company, we saw that our device had a lot of traction in Boston. So we opened an office in Boston. And 2 years after, the co-founders, Julia and myself, moved with the 4 kids to Boston. And one of the reasons was not only to be closer to our clients and the investigators we deal with, but also to launch this epilepsy trial. So let me show you what we did. In epilepsy, we stimulated 20 minutes, 10 days, patients suffering from epilepsy, refractory, so they don't respond to medication. And we stimulate them over the focus because these were focal refractory epileptic patients. So after 10 days of stimulation, this is what we did. So we asked the neurologist to give an MRI and an EEG of that particular patient. So based on the EEG and the fMRI, the doctor, the neurologist, tells us where the focus is coming from and what kind of current we should inject, which in this case is blue, is inhibitory. So in this is the target map of the brain. Based on this, our team with the MRI builds a 3D model of the brain of that patient, and then we compute how much current, how much electricity we need to get to really get to the target. And then every patient in our trial gets a different personalized protocol that is downloaded in the device. So with this personalized approach, we managed to reduce seizures almost by 47%. Remember, the patients don't respond to medication, so the alternative is surgery, either a craniotomy or an implanted device. So it's pretty awesome that you can reduce seizures almost by half, but of course, this is only 20 patients. So today, we are doing 190 patients in 40 hospitals on a pivotal phase 3 study, randomized controlled study. We have in Madrid Niño Jesús, La Ruber, we have Malaga, we have 8 hospitals in Barcelona, and then we have Belgium, France, Germany, and 20 hospitals in the US, Mayo, Johns Hopkins. So by the end of next year, if we sustain these effects in our randomized controlled trial, we will become the first company of the world to go through the FDA with this new therapy based on transcranial current stimulation. So pretty awesome that you can think of a device in the Observatory Fabra 20 years ago, and now it's at the footsteps of becoming a new therapy. We are also working on depression. During the pandemic, we asked the FDA whether we could send devices home because patients couldn't go to the hospital. So another example of how a crisis like the pandemic can become a huge opportunity. And we stimulated these patients. These are 35 patients, 30 days at home, every day, 20 minutes. They didn't see the psychiatrist, only on Zoom. And the caregiver was helping them to put the device on. But in total, 30 minutes for 28 days and then 9 days. And we saw amazing results, no side effects, really astonishing reduction on the MADRS, and almost 90% compliance. Some of these patients were like 80 years old, and they managed to do the stimulation more than a month at home, 30 minutes every day. So the results, of course, is an open label study, so there is no randomized control, but this has helped us to power the pivotal phase 3 study for the FDA, and now we are going to do 300 patients in a randomized control trial. Placebo is our, biggest challenge, but that's why you have to power the study big enough, and we are also very confident that I hope in 2 years we can have this data and bring this to the therapy. So we will not stop there. We are also doing research in Alzheimer's and other indications. But one of the things that we see the most of the future, Julio being a physicist and mathematician, is what we call neurotwins, or digital copies of the brain. These are computational neuroscience models of the brain. We are building neurotwins for Alzheimer's, for epilepsy and depression. And the idea is, can we really build a biophysical and electrophysiological model of the patient based on the MRI, on the EEG, and simulate on the cloud how will they respond to a treatment before we prescribe it. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think in neuroscience that you give a drug to a patient and then you tell them, come back after 3 months. So if you could simulate that in the cloud, that could be awesome, right? It's very difficult. We have 25 people only working on brain models, thanks to, we have a ERC grant, which I think is great that a private company like us, as a PI with Julio, got an ERC grant. We have H2020 grants, and with that, we are building all these neurotwin models. So as you can see, these are really amazing. In terms of indications, we would love to do down the line maybe some research with glioblastoma. We have some preliminary 9 patient data, so that would be something that we could discuss with the NEO, right? But how electrical stimulation affects glioblastoma is yet unknown territory. So it's food for thought in terms of cancer research. So we'll keep on building these models, computational models or neurotwins. But now I wanted to tell you, after all this success, what have we learned in this journey, right? So I think that when you follow your dreams, it's really a very difficult path. I mean, people, they look at me and they say, wow, Julio, you've really gone a long way. You're very successful. And the honest truth is that it's not a straight line, right? You're just making a lot of failures and mistakes and learning, right? It's not, for the young people, it's not that we have a fixed career and we just succeed. It's just we find it, along the way. So the only thing I knew when I was 18 is that I love math and I wanted to have an impact. But with those 2 things, you can go a long way. You know what I'm saying? So you don't need to have a lot of young girls come to me and say, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And it's like, so? It's like most of us don't, right? So I think that just having 2 passions, like you love science and you want to have an impact, there is 1,000 ways you can really have an impact or love science in many careers. So I think that in my career, a lot of people told me, but you and Julio were born to be entrepreneurs. And I said, no, one day we were working for this big company with a lot of money in Brussels, also called Starlab. And we were just employees. And the company made a huge bankruptcy. I mean, just from one day to the other. We were eating lobster in Brussels. The company was super rich, had the Rothschild family, Nicolas Negroponte, the City of London investors. This was in year 1999. And all of a sudden, it failed. And at that point, Julia and I, we were employees. And then, we were faced with a dilemma. I mean, do you take the red pill with the risk and you become an entrepreneur, or just take your finiquito and then just go home and keep on with your easy life, right? And at that point, we became entrepreneurs. But it's not a vocation. It's not something you're born with. It's a decision that you're taking in your life, which has the higher risk, right? And at that point, we realized that with science and business, you can really achieve a lot of the dreams, right? So one of the lessons we learned is we didn't raise money the day one. I told you that we started the company in year 2010, Neuroelectrics, and we started to sell devices to research institutions worldwide. Last year, we made $5 million only selling devices to researchers. So I think that sometimes selling what you have, even if it's not your final product, is a great way to start a company. And I think this is very European, and I think in the US, they have such an abundance of money that they don't bootstrap the European way. And I think we are awesome in bootstrapping because you really learn a lot from your customers. And this is some of the customers we still have today. But in 2010, 14, when we went to Boston, Julia and I, we moved there with our 4 kids in 2015. And at the beginning, it was so hard because I think Boston is one of the most competitive places on earth for life sciences. And I don't think here in Spain particularly, we have been trained to compete in such an aggressive way, right? But I think that one of the things that helped me a lot is reach out to the government, which they give us a grant, join accelerated programs, meet amazing mentors like Henry Termier. and do a lot of networking, right? So although it was very hard, I think that if you work hard, meritocracy exists. And I think the US is a place in which, if you have something of value, especially with science backing you, with good data, the system will recognize you. The FDA has been always very keen to Neuroelectrics, and we really have succeeded. So one of the hardest lessons learned, though, is that even though you do networking as well, a lot of people say, is networking worth it? I mean, it's super worth it. I mean, I think for your professional careers, but for your business careers, the fact that you have somebody to call when you have a doubt, think about it. I mean, you're a CEO, it's lonely up there, and there are so many things you don't know. You don't know about regulatory, you don't know about reimbursement, you don't know about market access, you don't know about IP, you don't know about legal, you don't know about a lot of things, right? So you need to have a telephone and somebody to call. And that is given by networking. So don't underestimate the power of networking. And I think the problem became when I needed to fundraise. I think that's where I realized that being a woman was a problem. Only 2% of all venture capital goes to women-led organizations. There is not enough diversity in the investment community. And what I learned in the Mobile World Congress, I was in a panel with a woman from the Women World Bank, Marie Ellen, and she told me that if you're a woman and your first investor is a woman-led venture capital, your chances to raise the second round drop by 50%. Are you kidding me? I mean, not only we only get 2% of the venture capital, but when a woman invests in us, it's penalizing us. It's like, what? So when I went to Boston, I wanted to raise money. I mean, we had sales, the company was successful, but we wanted to do this epilepsy trial. And an epilepsy FDA trial, you cannot fund it with your sales because that's millions of dollars, right? So I started to raise money. And one of my really bad anecdotes is that I couldn't raise money. This was in 2020, probably. And I sat down with a venture capitalist in Boston and I told her, listen, why I'm not raising money? This is so difficult. And then she looked at me and she said, well, because you need to put a man to raise money for you. And I was like, what? Year 2020? That's like the feedback that you're giving me? Is like, no way. I mean, I have 2 boys and 2 daughters. There's no way I'm going to put a man to raise money for me. So this is, for the women and diversity in the audience, this is the piece of advice you shouldn't take. When somebody tells you you cannot do it, or no, the system is like that, it's like, no way. So I persevere. I do what the Americans call the extra mile. So just work a little bit harder. Just put your energy and soul into that. And in year 2021, I raised $20 million of Series A from Boston investors. So, an example of, you can do it if you work hard and you can change the rules of the game, right? So that was one of my important lessons learned as a woman. The other, I think that in terms of the field where I'm moving, I think that we are going to see a revolution in the forms of stimulation to deal with brain diseases. We are working on electrical stimulation, but I have colleagues working on music to do, for example, essential tremor or Parkinson's, movement disorder, sorry. Brent is doing Cognito, which is an MIT spin-off doing lighting for Alzheimer's. They claim to reduce the amyloid plaque through gamma stimulation. Eddie is doing video games for ADHD that went through the FDA, like Akili. So I think we are going to see a lot of innovation in the brain. And it's not only because Elon Musk came into Neuralink with the implanted devices, but I think we are going to see more and more of amazing technologies for the brain. And I hope that in glioblastoma, some of these can be implemented. Other things that I have learned is that I think Europe has an opportunity. I'm considered a strong European defender, although I scale up to the US. We used to say at the European Innovation Council, which is a division of the Commission that has 10 billion euros for startups, and now it has the Pathfinder as well, so this kind of research to the market, that in Europe we have the potential to solve relevant problems in a responsible way. So relevant problems to me is deep tech. What we are doing at Neuroelectrics is deep tech, is really dealing with the most sophisticated, most complex part of our body, the brain. So it's climate change. So I think that the challenges we have as humanity, we will not solve with software to deliver food or to date people. We will solve them with deep tech. And that's why I think science and what you guys do here is so important, because we need deep tech and science. And then the responsible way. I think the ethical part of what we do is really important. And I think we entrepreneurs and you scientists have the potential to mark the ethics of what we do. I could be using my company to do brain-computer interfaces for playing games, but I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to devote so much effort and time of my life to have kiddos playing video games. I think it's not fulfilling, and we don't care about that. So you have a lot of saying in the ethics of what you do, because you always can say no and choose a different path, right? And to that, I think that the moment that Neuralink and a lot of these companies start implanting devices inside our brains, I think the ethics are going to be a very interesting debate, right? We are not as young in this room, but I wonder how the new generations will see implanted devices. I think it's a new frontier for the human mind, because with all the damage that social media is causing us, imagine when there is not filter. I mean, it's inside your brain directly. I think it's another dimension. Now you can decide not to have a Facebook account, not to have a mobile phone, go to the mountains and disconnect. But implanted devices is a new frontier. So, be ready for the debate. I'm also very obsessed with scaling up Europe. This is my crush with Emmanuel Macron, which I thought he was absolutely charming and amazing. But jokes aside, I think we have to put Europe into a scale-up picture, because we are the continent with most scientific publications of the world, and we failed to create successful businesses. And then it's the Facebooks and the Googles and all the people in the US, because they build phenomenal businesses, that they rule us. So I think, I think that Europe has to stand up and transforming science into money. We have tax money into science, and it's our tax money. But I think we have the responsibility to go from science to business again and bring money back to society. And I think that in this second part, we fail, because it's so difficult to create sustainable, scalable, profitable businesses. But I think the talent, we have it in Europe as they do in the US. So I think that this concept that scaling up a business or making money is wrong, we have to take it out of our mind, because otherwise we'll be at the hands of somebody else dictating how we need to live. And then the last thing is that I'm also representing Spain Tech, STEC, which is the Association of Spanish Unicorns. So we are not a country. I still, when I am in Boston all the time, or in San Francisco, people are just like, oh, Barcelona, Gaudí, Dalí, and and the paella and the sun is like, well, give me a break. It's like, still? So they don't value our science. We are not seen as tech countries, but we still have phenomenal unicorns in Spain. We have here Wallbox, we have Job and Talent, we have Filmin, we have Red Points, we have Cabify, we have Globo, we have Wallapop. So I think that these companies are companies that are competing at global level. And that they have a scale-up great companies with a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, high-tech companies. So I think we also need to be a little bit more proud. And the only reason why I said yes to STEC is because I think it's important to have a woman in the tech industry. So if you combine woman, Spain, and tech, it's pretty revolutionary, right? It's like, it reminds me of Karma Chacón being Minister of Defense, con el bombo, it's like, yes, hell yes, pregnant women, defense. So I think that these are the kind of things that we need to fight, because the world is very biased towards Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, and it's not ready for diversity. I'm a woman from Barcelona, I'm white, I'm privileged, and still I had it very hard to bring my neuroscience, in theory, objectively wonderful idea, no, into the world, right? So imagine if you're a person of color, if you have different sexual orientation, if you're coming from a minority country. I mean, they may be much smarter than me, they don't stand a chance, right? So I think we need to teach the world to be more diverse, and there is not typical scientist, not typical CEO. The world is diverse, so why all CEOs and all scientists have to be white guys? To my point. So I still think that you can raise a family and a business. I have 4 kids, and I'm very proud. I think I'm a good mom. You know, there are things that you have to leave aside, like the house being super tidy or your nails, but I think you can do work and family, so then let people tell you that you need to choose between your career and your family, because and be careful who you marry. You know, I think that the key is, you know, marry a smart partner that will take care of your kids equally as you, which I think it's great. And I think that you do not follow. So one of the things that I have learned in these 20 years as an entrepreneur is that I don't listen anymore of who has done what and what. You know, I listen, I learn, but then I do things how I think I should then follow my ethical values, my ideas, and you have to create a new path for people to follow, right? So I think that as a summary, to go from science to the market is a very long and hard road. Remember, I started in year 2000, so it's 23 years, waking up every day, fighting and fighting. So it resembles what you do as a neo, right? Every discovery is full of years and years and years of very hard work and failures. I think fundraising, regulatory reimbursement are very complicated to bring an innovation to the market. Bootstrapping to us was wonderful. It helped us really to grow the company without taking investors super early. And networking and perseverance are key. And I think that as a final remark, I think in Spain or in Europe, we always asking for permission to succeed or to progress. And I think that we have to learn to ask for forgiveness and not for permission, right? So just go the hell out there, and if you fail, just ask for forgiveness, but you don't need permission, just go a saco. Gracias. And I'm happy to take your questions. I'm sure you'll have many.
Yes, questions.
So Ana was fantastic. I already heard you, and it's sorry. Fantastic, very inspiring. So I'm going to ask you about the other company that you say still exists, right? The one you had on climate change. What exactly were you doing, and maybe now is the right time, because now I see that there are new companies to capture the CO2. They just launched them. New companies to make nuclear fusion with lasers. So it seems that now there is more investment. So what are you planning to do with that other company?
I think that, sometimes it's not that you have bad ideas, no, Maria, but maybe the timing is not right. You were too advanced. I think we were too advanced. We were doing Earth observation, so taking satellite data to protect the planet. So what we were doing is we had a beautiful service to watch at the trees from space. And we call it Greendex, the level of green around your city, right? So we thought that maybe real estate companies would benefit when you buy a house or parks in the city to see how the green is decreasing or not. We had a service to detect oil spills on the ocean, because as you know, there is a lot of illegal oil spill dropping in the sea. We had a system to monitor the sea level from satellite in lakes. I was, for example, in Laguna del Laja, in Chile, measuring lake level for hydropower generation. So these were all these system to alga bloom. But at the end, in our case for Earth observation, I think it was very early and nobody was ready to pay for that. The problem is that nobody wanted to pay. Because until we don't die of heat or there's no water to drink, we will not wake up. It's like this sad. So I don't know with the new economy, I know SpaceX is launching satellites and there is a new space initiative, but the problem is who's going to pay for that?
The European Commission has an interest to start with, right?
But we are not investing anymore. I mean, I think that's a train we tried we invested years and years, and now we close it, and I don't think we are going to and now we have to focus in neuro and keep on doing neuro.
Thank you very much for the talk. So very inspiring, and I like this idea of daring, right? And of course, it's easier sometimes than others not to follow or just to try and break the rules, no? So, but I have a question regarding the beginnings, and to see how did your company, how you started. So you mentioned that you had this idea space, and then you went into neuroscience, but the device. So was something that you've developed, or you acquired a patent, or how was it at the beginning? Because I would imagine a lot of intellectual property, and then the issue is how we deal with intellectual property. So you started a company through a university. So maybe a little bit on how. So you moved from the idea and the prototype to then scaling it.
Well, one of the things I'm most proud of is when Julio started to analyze those signals from EEGs with the team, then he was like, wow, the EEGs out there are not portable, they are not wireless, they don't serve the purpose of getting a lot of EEGs and analyzing data. So I don't know how we got involved into developing the hardware from scratch. So at the company, we asked for a couple of grants from the European Commission, and then one of the parts of the grants was to develop a prototype, which was a portable wireless EEG system. So we designed the PCB board, so we designed everything from scratch. And I have to tell you that now we have a factory in Barcelona where we manufacture right now around 500 devices per year, and we have the license to manufacture medical devices, all the warehouse, and so on. But to manufacture hardware, I think is one of the hardest things I've seen on Earth. That's when I see like software companies, I'm like so jealous and say, well, that's so easy to do. It's like just do hardware on a robust, scalable, sustainable way. So we design all the hardware that you've seen, all the electrodes, everything we design and manufacture ourselves. We don't do it in China, nowhere. It's all Spanish made.
That's very interesting. But then one thing is to record. That I could imagine that might be easier. Then
to stimulate?
You have the stimulation. So then for the stimulation there, so you have also then people in the company that now do research, and then to see where, because I could imagine that, I mean, I would, of course, have to be very controlled because it may stimulate areas that don't need to be stimulated.
Well, we already had the platform to do EEG, and then through a couple of European grants and projects, Julio was having some drinks in Brussels with a program officer at the commission, and over drinks they were brainstorming. They wanted to do a FED project, remember the Future and Emerging Technologies program? And they were brainstorming ideas, and together they were like, if you can read the brain and you have valid signals from the brain, what about if you could write into the brain? And the goal of this project was brain-to-brain communication, non-invasively. So they came with this idea and then submitted what it was called a brain-to-brain communication program for FED, in which for the first time in history, that was one of the most quoted papers in 2014, where Julio and Alvaro Pascual-Leone and some collaborators in Harvard, we did an experiment in which two brains were connected, one in India and one in France, with our devices, right? So I think that FED project help us to develop the whole stimulation paradigm to prove that brain-to-brain communication was possible non-invasively. And when we had the stimulation, we started to say, okay, now we have developed the technology, where we are going to apply it in. And then we started to see that there was medical indications that we could go after, and we focus on that.
Congratulations for the talk. I'm sorry for my voice.
No problem.
I have a question regarding the difference between Europe and the States regarding innovation, startups, and so on. Because I move in an environment from MIT that duplicate this kind of catalyst, ideas, everything in Europe, but all the startups start in Europe and went to Boston to make money. So what's the problem? Is the regulation in Europe? Is the lack of money, really? What's going on?
Well, the lack of money is a reality. I think that the statistics says that in US, the investment in venture capital in startup companies is 4 times higher than in Europe. So they invest 4 times more than we do. So of course, it's harder to find money in Europe, although I think it's changing. But I think it's also the mindset is very important. So I sometimes criticize European entrepreneurs for not being ambitious enough. And ambitious doesn't mean wanting to make money. Ambitious means if you can help epilepsy patients, where are you going to sell? To Catalans because you're from Barcelona? To Spanish because you're in Spain? To European, to France, wow, I sold in France, what the hell? To Europe, I mean, you should aim to help all the epilepsy patients of the world. Asia, US, and Europe, full stop. It's a mindset. So if you start to think like that, you start to think globally, to act globally, etc. So I think that one is the mindset, and the other, having spent so much time in Boston, I mean, the expertise they have in building businesses. I mean, in MIT, examples. Bob Langer, super amazing MIT guy with most patents, inventions, you name it, or George Church. But what I don't know if people are aware is that they are behind 1,000 companies successful. Bob Langer created Biogen, Moderna, flagship or one of the biggest flagship, venture capital. So they are embedded in the business ecosystem big time. And it's natural. That doesn't happen in Europe. And nobody, I mean, they don't say, Bob Langer, you've gone to the dark side. No, it's like, wow, you created Moderna. Well, good for him. You know what I'm saying? So that's another big difference, that science in Kendall Square, where my office is, science and business is not so different. And they fail constantly as well, but they are not afraid. I mean, George Church, I know him, I've seen him investing and promoting companies that they have failed, but they keep on doing new and new and new, right? So we don't have that mentality here. Yeah.
Very inspirational talk. Thank you so much. So I was curious when you were talking about the fundraising and that, suddenly you succeed, if there was anything particular that changed, or it was a question of perseverance or something that we can learn from that to change. And then somehow related to this last question, it seems to me that unless you have gone to Boston, maybe you wouldn't have succeeded. And I wonder about if that is your perspective, or if you just partially answer a little bit because of the difference. But
well, I think that I don't think I change a lot. Every time you pitch, like when you pitch your science, every time you pitch, you get better, right? So it's not like an art. I think it's also a science of trying and trying and trying and trying. But I think it was perseverance. It's like dating for your husband or your boyfriend. It's like meeting. There was a lot of investors. I mean, they didn't say yes, but I didn't want them in my company. They were complete assholes. It's like I don't want you. So it's also, having a right match of an investor that you respect, that they want to. It's not easy because it's a two-way road, right? You wouldn't get anybody in your company that you don't respect or you don't think are aligned, because that will kill the company, right? So I think it's a perseverance, but it's also a learning process. The only criticism is maybe I should have studied the investors much deeper, because it's not that they say no because they don't like you, it's because you don't match their profile. Maybe they're at the end of the fund and they don't have enough money, or they've never invested in medical devices and neuro, and they are very life sciences. So I think it requires a lot of deep work to analyze, to do a lot of desk research and understand who on paper would be your best. But then at the end, it's serendipity, it's networking. Somebody tells you about somebody, blah, 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 and then you end up meeting the investor of your life, and it's through informal means, right?
I mean, that will apply to men and women. I was curious on that difference that you mentioned.
Well, but I always tell my investor, there were two people in Boston that impressed me. One was Henry Termeer. Henry Termeer was the CEO and founder of Genzyme. Genzyme was sold to Sanofi in Boston. He was Dutch, so he went from the Netherlands to Boston, led Genzyme when the company was very small, and make it, I think, the beginning of the biotech industry in Boston, because he sold it to Sanofi. He became very wealthy, but that's where all the biotech industry started. So through some friends that I knew in Boston, I got acquainted with Henry. And when I sat down with Henry, it was astonishing how some people, they see through you. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. They didn't give a shit that I was from Barcelona, that I went to a public university, that I didn't go to MIT and Harvard. They focus on the value you're bringing to the world and whether you can do it or not. And I have to say that, unfortunately, not a lot of people are like that. People are biased by your accent, by your degree, and Henry wasn't like that. Neither was Gerald Chan, who is my investor. When I talked to Gerald, he also didn't care who I was in the good sense. He focused on the opportunity, on neurotech, and that's why I'm saying that the biases are so important, because they are so embedded especially in the money business, in the power, in the structures of power and money. I was talking to your colleague and she was saying, we are 70% women at Ceneo, but when we go up to management, it's 30%. Why? Because power and money, it's very biased and it's controlled by white men. So I think that having those people that they see through you is not easy to find. People that are meritocratic, that they really give you credit for what you bring, it's very hard to do.
I thank you very much. I want to ask you about this new frontier that you mentioned of neuroimplants.
Sí, se oye.
Sorry, yeah, now it's for because they are recording. So is there a way we can prepare for that new frontier? Or probably legislation sounds very an old word as compared to this new frontier of, because is there something that we can do as a society apart from laws and legislation, or what do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I think it's a very hot debate now everywhere, and with AI it's the same, right? I am more in favor of regulation, honestly, or strong guidelines, or whatever you call it, because I don't know, I have a feeling we failed with social media. We shouldn't have let it go the way it has gone to the benefit of this. I think we should have, as a society, complain and ask for stricter controls. I don't think it's normal that you have TikTok shooting content like that, or porn accessible. We used to have a television at home, and there was el periodo para los niños pequeños. So we used to restrict content. At what point we went to the free bar like that? So I'm pretty in favor of regulation, because I think that humans, we don't seem to be too healthy in ourselves. So as a society, I don't know, I guess we should be more active and rebel more. If you look at the social dilemma, when you look at this documentary, and then we still do nothing. It just tells a lot about us. So if we don't take action, the government should. No, es como lo del cinturón de seguridad. Nadie se lo ponía until you're obliged. And now everybody, but if you take the So I'm sorry, it's like I just don't trust humans anymore.
Anna, thank you. That was very nice. I'm thinking about the technology that you explained. So now these days of machine learning and all of that, so can you use the data you have retrospectively to kind of guess which ones didn't work and why is that from the ECGs or from any other parameter that you can use as a biomarker of predictability of the technology, and also prospectively. So did you include in the questionnaires not only whether they have seizures but other parameters on cognition, memory, maybe those things that you're doing, maybe they improve other areas that that you could test?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. And we don't have a lot of resources as a company. So I think Julio is building with the team the computational models, and then we need to feed them with data. And as you know, the more data you feed them, the better the model will work. Our hope is that the moment we are approved for FDA and we can take this home, that's where every time we can stimulate a patient home, we will be recording EEG in real time and all this data. I mean, my data size right now in epilepsy is 190 patients in the FDA trial and 300 in depression, right? But it's very hard to get control data from thousands of patients, I think, until we don't reach home and we become a successful therapy. So our goal, I think biomarkers is amazing, and we are asking for some grants to do EEG biomarkers for depression. EEG is only used now in epilepsy, sleep disorders, and very, very seldom, like to certify death, right? But I think that with machine learning, we have the potential to extract more value of EEG data, for example, in depression, in mental health. But I think that everything requires funding, because we need to develop the science and do trials, and we have decided to focus on therapy. And with the excuse of therapy, I hope patients will feel better, will want to take this home, and then we can record all these massive amounts of data.
I don't know if we have more questions.
I just wanted to comment on the social network. Networks. I think the FDA has already clearly said that this is something bad for the health of young people, but we haven't heard anything like that in Europe yet.
But maybe we should ban it until they are not whatever years old. I mean, you can have a phone for your kids to contact you or whatever, but some content should be banned. There is I don't know if it's in Catalan or in Castellan, there is an amazing program by TV3 on porn on young adults. You should see it. In TV3, it opens your eyes. The access that kids of 12, 13, 14 years old have to porn, we've never seen that before. I mean, just think of that simple thing. The way it changes the relationship with having sex, and it's because the access to content. I mean, how can we allow a 12-year-old to have all the free porn content of the world? It's shocking, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think it's you should watch this documentary, because I think it just opens your eyes.
Thank you for your talk, first of all. And my question is related to the previous one. You said you work with some institutions, hospitals, universities. I presume you work with neuroscientists.
Correct.
Using your device.
Mm-hmm.
They control what you do in many ways.
Correct.
So what do they think about the efficiency of your device in the case of Alzheimer, for example? I'm really worried about Alzheimer. And I am asking myself all the time why we still don't have a treatment for Alzheimer. So if your device works, this will be revolutionary, absolutely. So what do they think? And is it proof that works in this specific case?
It's not proof. And the only thing we are doing is we have some papers published, but of course the sample size is small. I think Alzheimer's, the reason why we don't have a cure is very complex Alzheimer. It's a very complicated, for example, epilepsy, I think, is an easier pathology, because the endpoint is you have seizures, you don't have seizures, right? We have a focus that you can find it through an MRI or an EEG. It's a very well-studied neurological disease. Alzheimer's, we don't even know where it comes from. We don't even know why people get it. The tools to test Alzheimer's are imaging very expensive PET or tau images, super expensive. And they don't super correlate with the cognitive status of the person. So imagine how complex. You may have an amyloid plaque, but you may cognitively not be as bad. So it's not a very good endpoint either. And then the others are very subjective. So I think Alzheimer's is a very complicated disease. And I think, as it is depression to a certain level, right? So these are very complicated diseases. But we are working very hard collecting data. I think that it's true that our technology, we know it has a cortical effect, and for cognitive decline and other cognitive diseases, I think stimulation will help, but we still have to collect the data, basic science data, to design good studies and to take them through the FDA. So it will take us money and time to get there, but I think in Alzheimer's we can do it, but I still think that not before 5-7 years. No way, it's too difficult.
One last question.
Hi, thank you for the super interesting talk. So I have a question about depression, because if I didn't understand well, so for epilepsy, you were trying with children that were refractory to drugs. But for depression, do you start treating patients that are under drugs and maybe decrease the medication when it's succeeding the stimulation, or how does it work?
Really good question. All of our trials, especially in epilepsy and depression, are with refractory patients. So one of the reasons is, first, we don't want to get into a fight with all the big pharma companies. We have all the chances to lose. Second, I think that the FDA is keener when there is no alternative. So if you go to the FDA always thinks it's not that your therapy is safe. If it doesn't bring anything more to what it's out there, why should I approve it? If patients are being served by a drug or by a surgery, why do I need to approve your therapy, right? So working with refractory patients gives you a window of dialogue with the FDA. So I think that in depression, we are doing refractory. And I think that maybe down the line, once we are approved, once patients use it, maybe because we have less side effects, because you can use it at home, maybe it will become first line of therapy. But for the moment, we are always starting with refractory patients.
Okay, I think we are going to finish here. Many questions from the public because of this interesting talk, and especially very inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to us. Thank you.